Hello and welcome. The Manchester area is no stranger to Leyland Titan buses. The companies that were fused together to form initially Selneck, which stood for South East Lancashire and North East Cheshire, which was later to become Greater Manchester PTE, had mostly been customers of the original front-engined Leyland Titan. Now I'm talking about the TD series and indeed the PD series. Many of the later deliveries in the PD ranged Leyland Titans lasted well into the PTE era, but many of the companies were actually buying a bit of a mixed bag of front-engined and rear-engine buses. For example, Manchester Corporation's first rear-engine buses arrived at the end of 1961 and were 10 Metro Camel Leyland Atlanteans. This was followed by a steady mix of Fleetlines and Atlanteans. However, later on in 1961, there was a more conventional order placed for 10 Daimler CVG6s, which were front-engined double-decker buses, and 40 more Leyland PD2 Titans. In March 1965, Ralph Bennett was appointed the role of General Manager at Manchester Corporation Transport, having previously been the General Manager at Bolton. Now, one-man operation of double-decker buses was permitted from the 1st of July 1966, although there was a previous concession that had allowed them to be operated without a conductor as long as the top deck was closed off. Aware of the rising costs of labour, which incidentally accounted for 60% of the operational costs, Ralph Bennett was instrumental in pushing Manchester Corporation into one-man operated buses, and this would eventually see the birth of the Manunian. The Manunian was a very modernistic designed double-decker bus and was designed from the outset to be one-man operated. It would be fitted to either Leyland Atlantean chassis or Daimler Fleetline chassis, with the bodywork being constructed by 4 bodybuilders. Park Royal built most of the bodies, despite there being an initial confrontation with Ralph Bennett over Park Royal wanting to supply its own design bodywork. The rest were built by Rowe, MCW and East Lancs. Now, I don't know about you, but it's rather strange that there's no Northern Counties on the list, is there? Especially how Northern Counties and Greater Manchester Transport, when they were the PTE, went hand in hand. So I hope you can see by that bit of a prologue that Manchester was actually a very forward-thinking city when it came to public transport. Now, after the success, and I use that term lightly, of the Leyland National, British Leyland were now looking at introducing a double-decker equivalent, and we have done both the Leyland National and the Leyland Titan on Classic Bus Histories. So I will try to remember to put a little link up in the top right hand corner to both these videos. It was envisaged that the Titan would be very similar to the Leyland National, as in it was a one-cap-fits-all bus and you could either take it or leave it, which, as we've said before in other videos, was very much Leyland's way of thinking at the time. The new bus, which was codenamed initially the B15, was designed to replace the Leyland Atlantean and the Daimler Fleetline. However, as we all know, the story of the Leyland Titan was a rather unhappy one and probably one of the biggest what-ifs in the whole bus industry. Production problems at Park Royal meant that the buses that should have been built weren't built, and there were huge delays in the construction of the Leyland Titan. Now, interestingly, the first orders for Leyland Titans included operators like Greater Glasgow PTE, Alexander Fife, which was on behalf of the Scottish Bus Group, Lothian, Tyne and Wear, Maidstone and District, which was on behalf of the National Bus Company, Southend, Merseyside PTE, South Yorkshire PTE, West Yorkshire PTE, and there was meant to be one apiece for Cardiff and Tayside. Now, West Midlands had ordered 80 Leyland Titans, and Greater Manchester PTE had ordered 190. On top of this, London Transport had placed a big order for 250 buses. In the end, as we know, West Midlands Transport only ended up with 5 Titans, and Greater Manchester eventually accumulated 15. It was only London Transport who received the complete order for 250 buses. Everybody else's orders were cancelled, although there was also one bus built for China Motorbus. The 15 Leyland Titans that were delivered to Greater Manchester PTE were given the fleet numbers 4001 to 4015 and had the registration numbers of ANE 1 and 2T for 4001 and 4002, FVR3V for 4003, ANE 4 and 5T for 4004 and 4005, and the rest were registered GNF 6 to 15V. The standard Gardner 6LXB was fitted to most of the buses apart from the last four. GNF 12 to 15V received TL11 engines. 4001 ANE1T was exhibited at the 1978 Motor Show, alongside London Transport's T8, which was WYV8T. Meanwhile, outside you could ride to and from the exhibition in another Titan, this one being West Midlands WDA1T. They were delivered to Greater Manchester PTE between April 1979 and early 1980, and were fitted with Park Royal 73-seat bodywork with 47 seats upstairs and 26 seats downstairs. Now, these Titans differed to the London Titans in the fact they were single-doored buses. As a result of them being single-doored, the staircase was moved to immediately behind the driving compartment, unlike the London Transport buses that had a small gap with a bench seat there. There were other detailed differences too with the Greater Manchester Transport Leyland Titans. They had the standard Manchester destination display for one. They had more brightwork than the standard London Titans on the outside. And also, while the London Titans had top slider opening windows, these had hopper windows that could be pulled inwards to ventilate the bus. The interior maquette as well was to Greater Manchester's standard design, as opposed to the Misha Black design that was used on the London Titans. Now, it's quite interesting that by 1983, 10 of the 15 Titans within the Greater Manchester fleet had been allocated to the Glossop depot. Here they operated a mix of both cross-city and rural services. And at one time it was said that outside of London, if you wanted to ride on a Leyland Titan, that Glossop, which is actually a small Derbyshire market town, was home to the biggest fleet of Titans outside the capital city. In the mid-80s, there was a major fly in the ointment, and that fly in the ointment was called deregulation. Now, we normally associate deregulation with the National Bus Company, but it did also affect the PTE fleets as well. On the 26th of October 1986, all the Titans, along with the first MCW Metro buses and all the other non-standard vehicles, were withdrawn. Now, that might sound a bit strange. 15 is quite a big number of buses, but in a large fleet like Manchester's that was running thousands of Leyland Atlanteans, 15 buses are very easily lost and very quickly become non-standard. The buses were sold to various owners by Kirby's, where they went on to have second lives with other operators. Companies like Aintree Coaches, Swindon and District, Village Bus of Merseyside and Blue Triangle all benefited from these fairly decent newish buses. Several even turned up in the London area as well. GNF 13V operating with Capital City Bus of Dagenham and GNF 15V operating with University Bus of Hatfield, whilst two GNF 7V and GNF 11V went on to work in the movie industry as a film location bus. So who knows what famous bums have sat on those two buses eating their food whilst on a break in with filming. There was at one stage 4 of the batch preserved as well, with ANE2T, the former 4002, being preserved by the Selneck Preservation Society, where it has been extensively restored, and it is absolutely a stunning specimen of a Leyland Titan. It's probably better than new, I think is a fair thing to say. They also have Leyland engined GNF 15V, the last of the batch delivered. Now normally they like to go for the first vehicle of a batch for their collection. However, 4001 ANE1T, the former motor show bus, was sold to Wright of Hexham and was scrapped in 1991, which is quite an early date for a Titan to be scrapped, isn't it really? It must have had a few issues with it. So do we think if the Leyland Titan had been a success and had been built, whether Greater Manchester PTE would have come back for further buses after its order for 180? So what do you think? Comment down below. Do you think that there would have been more and more of these buses replacing the Atlanteans in the Greater Manchester fleet? Or do you think it would have stuck with the 180 and they would have been gone relatively quickly? I always love reading your comments and your theories as well, so this one will be quite an interesting one, won't it? My own personal opinion is once the 180 Titans had been delivered, they would have probably moved on to the Olympian or the Metro bus, as these could be bodied by local supplier, Northern Counties of Wigan. And we all know how keen to support that local industry Greater Manchester PTE was. After the initial batch of Metro buses, the rest were bodied by Northern Counties. And it was the same with the Leyland Olympians. They were bodied by Northern Counties too. So unless Leyland was going to develop a version of the Titan that could be bodied by other manufacturers, in the same way that the B21 was developed from the Leyland National, I can't really see Greater Manchester Transport going for them in huge numbers. But there is an interesting speculation, yet another one, isn't there? A Northern Counties bodied Leyland Titan, or an Alexander bodied Leyland Titan running for Lothian. The possibilities are endless, but that might be the subject for another video. A few years later, in the early 1990s, Leyland Titans would return to the northwest of England, only this time they would be in Liverpool. Now I know mentioning Liverpool in a video about Manchester's buses is probably going to cause a riot, but bear with me. There was around a total of 400 former London Transport Leyland Titans which entered service, with the many operators plying their trade around the city of Liverpool. And although some found their way into service in Manchester, it's perhaps a shame that they didn't find their way into service in such a vast quantity in the city. I hope you enjoyed this look at this rather interesting small batch of orange Leyland Titans. If you did enjoy this video, please like and share it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on my future releases. Many thanks for watching. Bye for now.